before I actually get into the discussion, I want to just take a minute or two to set the context for what we are looking at in today's discussion. Like, as you all know, the topic is upskilling for effective digital transformation and sustainable innovation. Now, if you really look at digital business innovation, it is at the core of businesses today, as they prepare for the next phase of growth and revival in this fast-paced new normal. And we like I was talking to all of you, and we organizations are, the way they work, the way they operate, it's changing, and digital transformation is the key catalyst here. And what we have already seen that the result of the focus on digital transformation, with several years of transformation compressed within a few months. So the key to success of organizations' digital agenda and impactful business outcomes will depend on how effectively they are able to keep pace with this accelerated adoption of digital technologies such as AI, analytics, cloud, IoT, etc. And when I say that, I don't mean the technology tools adoption alone. Digital transformation is not about technology alone. Organizations are fast realizing that the road to rapid yet sustainable digital transformation runs right through people, processes, and technology. And this is the innovation cocktail that has a high value impact on your digital transformation. And if your digital transformation agenda is delicately balancing on these three elements, and if you take away even one of the elements, the balance will be disturbed. So today we are going to be looking at the people, or rather the skills part of the digital transformation equation. And what we have seen is that the exponential growth in the adoption of digital technologies has resulted in a consequent increase in demand for the right skill sets, leading to the shortage of these digital skills. The demand for digital skills has outpaced the supply, and this talent gap is likely to stay for a while. Now, this exponential shortage of the right skills can jeopardize the company's ambitions to become digital first. Another challenge that we see here is that the digital skill sets are a constantly moving target, considering that technologies are rapidly evolving. And this requires moving your workforce up the skill value chain. And this is a continuous process. It's not that once you have upskilled them, the work is done. So digital dexterity is best attained by evaluating the skills gap of your tech workforce, reskilling and upskilling them to supercharge your digital transformation efforts. And this means injecting a heavy dose of new capabilities into your digital skills. Now, expertise in key areas like cloud, data, and cognitive abilities can help accelerate your digital agenda. And in the course of today's discussion, these are some of the aspects that I would like to bring up, which is, discussing upskilling your tech workforce and how that can help drive innovation throughout the enterprise. So while every one of you have already said hi to each other, let me formally introduce all of you to each other. I have with me in the panel today, Mr. Mahesh Zurale, Senior Managing Director, Lead Advanced Technology Centers in India for Accenture. Mr. Ramesh Kaza, Senior Managing Director, Country Head IT, India Head of Strategy and Transformation and International CIO, State Street Bank and Trust. Mr. Sudhir Dasamantha Rao, Director, Global Business Services and Chief Transformation Officer, APAC for Boston Scientific. Mr. Santhanam Govindaraj, Executive Director, Capital Markets for Broadridge. Mr. Isaac Rajkumar, Managing Director, India for OpenText. Mr. Sachin Kulkarni, Senior Vice President, Fiserv. And Mr. Dallas Krishnan, Managing Director, Enterprise, Coursera. Before I start the discussion, I want to bring in Dallas, for a minute or two. To give you a background, before joining Coursera, Dallas actually worked for leading organizations like Salesforce, Amazon Web Services, IBM, and SAP. And there he worked with their customers, which included from startups to large conglomerates, to transform their businesses leveraging digital technologies. And he has worked extensively in technology domains like AI, ML, cloud computing, IoT, big data, etc. So Dallas, a very interesting shift that you made, to to learning, to the learning aspect, the skills aspect of the technology domain, from tools to skills. So, can you just give us a bit of background on why you did that, and just a little bit of introduction before we get started?
So I guess the distortion should have gone and removed the background. So first and foremost, thank you, Shipra, for the introduction, and hello everyone. Always wonderful to speak to fellow people from the industry. So having spent 27 years in the tech side of it, I guess the way I would put it across is that it's you always see that while you have the best of technology, a lot of the times the failed projects that we see have to do with either skills or to do with some form of processes, right? So typically these two areas, right? The technology element in various organizations would be the common element, but these are the two elements where we would normally result in some form of a failure. And those failures could have been either in the context of a deployment, which could be led by an SI or a partner, for the right skills and right people not being there. The other aspect typically happens in the adoption side, which is typically building the capability of the organization to ingest a technology and then adapt it to their business innovation. So now you having spent that part of the world, it's an interesting pivot to get into this other side, which is more an enabling part of it, right? And the way I see this is that how do you make this at the center of transformation, right? Skilling and upskilling is no longer something that follows a project. It's not something that chases a digital tool. It has to be thought of in the context of a capability building organization. In my conversations with a lot of the people that I'm interacting with, I think a lot of organizations are maturing and moving away from a tools-based, technology-based practices to more capability-based organizations. You're aligning skill sets to roles, and then you're measuring more skill index and digital transformation quotients and the various measurement tools that I've seen. So it'll be interesting to hear that perspective. One is of course embedding the people element in transformation upfront, right? And it will be wonderful to hear people's perspectives on that.
Thanks, Dallas. I think the way you said that embedding the people element into the transformation, really like that. Let's just get started with the discussion. To start with, Sachin, if I can come to you, before I come to the skills aspect or the people aspect, how have you seen the business landscape change in terms of being digital first to be future ready within your organization?
So first of all, good afternoon, Shipra. And it's a great pleasure to be both in this forum and with such a distinguished panel. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. Look, any question around business landscape, I sort of look at it in terms of the new business paradigms. And for me, the first new paradigm is just how much percentage of investment in tech today is going into transforming user experiences to be faster, better, more secure, more compelling, differentiated, immersive, highly customized or hyper-personalized, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the first thing. The second is with flattened access to talent, which is kind of, I think, the main theme of our discussion, the war of talent just went global. And it has completely redefined location strategies in today's low travel, socially distanced COVID world. And as a direct consequence, everyone embracing new ways of working via virtual collaboration tools for ideating, for strategizing, for solutioning. And in my view, some of these shifts are actually more permanent than we might imagine them to be, i.e. they will continue even as we return to work in some sort of hybrid model. The third new paradigm is that customer expectations around time to market. Time to market was always important for as long as I remember throughout the 28 years of my career. But the time to market expectations to deliver both new products and new services, I think just went up by orders of magnitude. So we're talking months to weeks and weeks to days. And then finally, as COVID exacerbated sort of these existing trends of digital acceleration and innovation, consumers have finally crossed that chasm of trust deficit. And that's not an India comment or Asia Pacific comment, that's a global comment across digital financial transactions. So that's the fourth paradigm. So that's how I sort of look at the paradigms. And then arising from these new paradigms, there's a whole new set of use cases in every industry that have emerged and are emerging across the life cycle of consumer journey. So for example, and my examples will be financial services, given I'm with Fiserv, but contactless. So just think contactless, NFC-enabled cards and NFC-enabled ATMs, for instance, that are contactless, right? So we are at Fiserv, we've built device labs on cloud to virtually test these ATMs and card readers and mobile devices. Another one for large and complex transactions is the patented biometric authentication. So right thumb, retina, and left index finger combination, as an example. Or another one is, a use case is a video KYC for onboarding, for customer onboarding with AI to detect deep fakes to make consumer or customer onboarding more secure, informed by a technology called General Adversarial Network, or GAN, G-A-N. Another use case in e-commerce, and I can go on, but I'll stop here. Another use case in e-commerce is the use of hyper-personalized AI-driven recommendations to influence individual customer behaviors. And I'm sure my fellow panelists can think of other use cases, but the point is, I think the context of omni-channel and digital transformation, at least from a financial services perspective, is that more and more millennials and Gen Z consumers now represent truly a global customer base for banking, for payments, for e-commerce, and for any other financial need. So we have to design solutions that are mobile first, consume 24/7, on demand, real time, with connected experience across channels, reaching customers or consumers where they are rather than expecting them to walk into a branch. And by the way, no touch options. And so that's sort of my broad perspective on how the business landscape is evolving. And there's a whole ecosystem of product companies, services companies, fintechs, private equity firms that are, I think, colluding and coalescing together to respond to that evolving market need.
No, absolutely. So if you really talk about use cases, I think they're just limited by one's imagination, and it's not just in the banking and financial services industry, but across the spectrum. So Ramesh, I want to bring you into the conversation here. Again, the kind of transformation that has happened over the last few months, or rather 1.5 years, is unprecedented. So how much of a focus or how much of a attention are you paying to digital transformation? Where is it in your agenda towards future growth and revival?
Thank you, Shipra, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. On 10th of June, State Street Bank and Trust has officially announced creation of a new division within the company. It's called State Street Digital. And if you Google it, you will find every information I'm talking about. The existing EVP, Nadine Shekhar, who is managing the global markets business, she's been elevated to take this function. What is State Street Digital? It kind of dovetails and connects very well with what Sachin shared just now to the questions you're asking, that State Street being the industry leader for custodial business, and today till date we are the assets under custody are roughly about $40 trillion for this company. In a long run, if the company has to survive, it has to adopt to the digital currency. This function, this organization that got just started about a month and a half back, is going to focus only on these activities. How do we adopt to the cryptocurrency? As our clients will start to utilize cryptocurrency as one of the ways to manage their assets. So we as a company should be ready for it. How do we manage the central bank digital currencies? How do we get on to tokenization? How do we ensure that the reality of the blockchain, which is coming out of the hype curve, now getting into, I would say, utilization, just like the AI industry, can be adopted? The entire focus of this organization is going to be that. So in a way, to answer your question, the company is getting ready. While the competitors are also there in the same tray, our job is to ensure that we're also partnering with them. This actually happened only 6 weeks back. So you can pretty much say that this is a baby that is born through the COVID lockdowns. And the company started to realize that a very traditional work in the office culture needs to be changing, and it is changing because of where we are today. And the confidence levels went up for the companies like State Street and others that India can adopt to 100% work from home if needed. All of us collectively proved that. So in a way, it's a very positive news that all the 4.8 million people who are working from India, from this industry, have proved that they can make this work. That means whether we move to a hybrid model or even come back to work at any point of time, we can make the workforce pretty much available from anywhere. So this is one of the major transformations the company is going through, and it's also public. Now coming home to what's happening out of this location in the country, within the technology organization, I realized that the biggest asset we can have from this location is not data centers, not the infrastructure, but the people, because its primary focus is people. So we, while we have partnership with organizations like Coursera and many other organizations where we do take memberships and do it, we also realize that instead of sending everybody to every training, let's find out where the real gaps are and where their passion is. It's not just about taking them to a role and then making them to go through enormous amount of trainings where they don't pay attention. So we have programs like Skill Central that actually is an application built out of this location. And we do a complete thorough assessment of the persons. And that kind of originated a little before the COVID time. And we used that very extensively during this lockdown time to be able to identify where are the real opportunities for people to get trained, not just to their current role, but for their future role. One, to make the company get the best out of them. That means optimally utilize their skills. That's a primary reason. The second is to the fact that we did not hire them for today. We hired them for the future. That means we should get them ready with a more structured training programs. So in a way, it's truly helping us to be able to assess them on their technology skills, on their domain knowledge, because we are a fintech company. We need to have a deep understanding of the functional knowledge also. The third dimension is the leadership skills, behavioral skills, right from the campus graduate all the way to a senior leader. And the fourth dimension we added is the emerging technologies. What is their passion, where they want it to be? To my surprise, what I've realized is a person who is 20 years into the company or a person who joined yesterday, they have shown equal passion to learn new technologies. That's a very positive moment for us and to the tech in India. And what I'm hoping is that we from India should be able to train these people using a more structured interventional training programs to be able to feed those resources into the Straight Street digital platform. So that's in a nutshell where we are heading. Hopefully that'll give an idea, and we can certainly answer more questions as we go through. Back to you, Shipra.
Thanks, Ramesh, for bringing in the people element, the skills element before I actually moved into it. So Mahesh, Accenture, again, one of the largest IT services companies. You have customers who depend on you for the best of the digital technologies and the best of the digital skills. So I'm sure, I think no one else will realize the skills problem as much as you would. So I want to understand from you, with the accelerated demand for digital and data skills, do you see a talent gap in your tech workforce in terms of where they are now and how you would like them to be equipped with? If you really look at the kind of demand and supply, what kind of gap do you see? And how are you? Are there any initiatives that you've undertaken to bridge this gap?
Indeed, there's a talent gap. I guess to understand where that's coming from, just a quick reference back to what Sachin and Ramesh were just saying, that COVID is essentially is compressing decades of digital transformation into months. Everybody wants to get there yesterday, all of a sudden, right? And it's all coming from, like Sachin said, from the consumers asked to create new digital experiences for them. And when we build systems for our customers, therefore our people have to completely understand what is happening in that industry, what are the new business models, etc. It's not just a technology gap. It's about helping our customers create value through these differentiated digital experiences. So what do we require therefore? What do our people need to have? What are the implications? First of all, the need to understand the shifts in the industry and the business models and how the digital technologies can help. So it's not, you can't just bring on board a new engineer and expect to deliver to that expectation from our clients. Second thing is the need for speed. You got to move at breakneck speed. That means our developers have to have understanding of the new methodologies. But it's not even that. In the past, I could say I'm a developer. Somebody else will say I'm an infrastructure person. I'm a tester. If you want to bring in speed, you need to have understanding of the complete stack, right? So that's the other thing that is happening. You have so when you look at these multiple shifts that are coming in, you find that our existing people, we need to upskill them in these different dimensions. How do you, for example, create new collaboration models when people are distributed across literally tens of cities in Azure? So what we do is that we are looking at all these aspects, and we need to make sure that we have very, very robust developmental programs to inculcate deep industry skills. We ask our people to focus and specialize by industry. We want them to be obviously abreast with the technologies, but how do we create more and more, say, full stack engineers as an example, right? How do we get our people certified, cloud certified? How do we, in the past, in Indian tech industry, you would always find that the so-called high value roles will be onshore, and you almost had that divide. What the remote working has done is that a lot of those roles are now very rapidly shifting to India. So we need to not just give technology skills, we need to help our people understand how to deal with the customers. How do you co-create a solution with the customers? So our training programs, we now cater to all these multi-dimensional aspects. We have very, very strong, Accenture spends more than $1 billion on training every year. So we are focused on industry trainings, technology trainings, development methodology, upgrades, and so on and so forth. So in India, we have an academy, and we are focused on creating those skills. Now, talking about the skills shortage, to some extent, everybody would like to just recruit ready skills. That has been the way a lot of people work, right? We have been all talking about STEM graduates, and you want X years of experience, and you sort of try and shortcut that. We have changed our focus. We would like rather be the talent creator rather than just importer of a talent. We also think that we need to move beyond STEM. So for example, I would love to bring in an arts graduate, somebody who understands economics, because it brings with them the diversity of thought, which is so very critical for creating these digital, new generation experiences for the client. So our focus has shifted from just recruitment to broadening the sphere from where we recruit, more differentiated educational backgrounds, bring them on board, and then we train them internally rather than just relying on taking over ready talent.
Also, one more thing is that when you really talking about taking over ready talent, they will suffice you for let's say a year, but again you need to upskill them as well, because the technology is evolving. So you never are you never it's like I said, it's a changing goalpost. You have never achieved the target even if you hire ready talent. So Isaac, I want to ask you, what are the challenges that you see as far as the skills gap are concerned, or the right digital and data skills are concerned? What is the biggest challenge that you see within your organization?
Sure, Shipra. Good afternoon, everyone. So maybe I'll give you a little bit more context on how we see the digital first itself, that it can lead into what it means to us in terms of the skills we need. So we are a leader in enterprise information management. We are an enterprise software company. Okay, and in terms of digital first, from our perspective, from our customers and understanding of the needs and the definition, it means several dimensions, right? One of the important dimensions, particularly in the context of the pandemic, is about business continuity and resilience, right? I think that has come to the forefront compared to wherever it was before, right? And secondly, as Sachin mentioned as well, the compelling customer experience. Now, if you're going to go digital first and then you're bringing on a lot of people, then obviously the customer experience becomes a central part of it. Then we also deal with, if digitalization is adopted so much, there is going to be a lot of information sprawl within an organization, whether it is documents, emails, or all kind of content. Then the question is about how do you manage the content, how do you leverage the content, and then compliance around it, controls around it. Now, again, okay, these are all good problems to solve, again, but they come into being because now we are also going digital, right? More digital. And then, of course, there is a question of, because of all of this remote work, and at least everybody is thinking about some sort of hybrid work, then it becomes a question of, okay, in that context, how do you really enable your own employees, right? And the employee engagement and the innovation, how is everybody plugged into the ecosystem? So when we look at digital first, it really caters to multiple dimensions, right? I mean, it is about business continuity, it is about building compelling experience, compliance, and it is also not only that, but also making sure your own employees can contribute to all of these things in this hybrid remote model, right? So now when we look at this from a larger scope of it, then when we think back into what are the kinds of technologies that would play a role into it, it is actually far and wide. I mean, of course, cloud we have all talked about, and in terms of centralizing the management and all of that is going to be very helpful in the context of digital first. But not only that, of course, the content management becomes very important. And then along with that, analytics, right? And analytics, not just in terms of visualization and decision making, but also in the context of other artificial intelligence and automation and other aspects of it, because these lead to, again, good competitive advantage, right? And not only that, I mean, we heard about somebody mentioned about rapid return of investment. Then you are then dealing with, from a technology point of view, no code, low code development, and applications that are it's not taking 1 year, 2 years to plan and execute, but maybe in a days or a few weeks you want everything up and running, new enhancements up and running. So some of these other technologies come into being in terms of no code and low code. Then again, from a technology point of view, you deal with cybersecurity and all the things that go with it. Now, if you're in cloud, not in your own premise, now you're opening up things for a lot more attacks as such. But your the way you go about your own development, all of it again becomes a critical matter as a software developer company need to address. When of course now when devices and if employees are all over the country or all over the world, then it also means your data protection problem becomes all the more important, right? All the devices everybody works on, what is the protection there, what is the security there? So I think what has happened is some of the things about digitalization, digital transformation is not particularly new, but then it has taken a very different and accelerated dimension now, because more security aspects come in and the distributed workforce come in. How do you innovate in all of this? All of these things come. So for a product development company like us, then it is no longer looking at one dimension of whether it is analytics or rapid development or anything. It really cuts across everything, right? I mean, when we build a new solution for say web content management or a customer communications or document management, you're dealing with cloud, you're dealing with digital experience, dealing with automation, analytics, rapid development, and cybersecurity and data protection, right? But then when you go through this full list, obviously skill is not going to be available. We cannot go to market and say, okay, I want somebody who has all these sort of things, because even under each one of the line items, you will see some half a dozen different technologies that continue to evolve, right? So it really, to an extent, comes down to, from an individual contributor technology point of view, there has to be continuous learning within the organization. Hire the right people for the right core skills, right? I mean, there are certain core skills as engineers you'd want to be part of the organization, but not necessarily look for anything and everything, but then look at other avenues to skill them up over a period of time, either because of mentorship or through online training courses, custom training, and so on. So, and the whole domain itself is a big thing, right? So I think it is a more time-consuming process. I don't think it's a readily available thing. I think we have to go through the whole part with a very long-term view in the mix. I mean, that is how we look at it. But I also want to underscore one other angle to it on the strain all of this causes on management and management training. I mean, one is, of course, when I say management, it is all levels of management. One of the things I do feel is the first level of management is the one that got most affected by this. Many of them have never been remotely managed and never have managed anybody remotely in the past, right? And suddenly we put them in a situation, the junior most of the managers who are trying to get into management, into such a situation to deal with hiring, innovation, engagement, mentorship, and everything. So again here, right, there is more effort that is needed in terms of helping them with the right processes that could be used, right tools to be used, collaboration and all of it. So I think it is overall, the spectrum of the problem spans across technologies, individual contributors, and management. But I don't think there is any out-of-the-box solution in terms of hire somebody and they will come and do it. But there is a lot of investment ongoing within the organization. At least that is how we see it.
Absolutely. I think it's not just digital transformation, but the whole dimension of digital transformation that has changed. And therefore, that has an impact on the kind of skilling and upskilling programs that you have for your workforce. So before I go to Sudhir and Dallas, I want to bring you into this conversation briefly. You know, you've heard from some of the panelists, and you've been speaking to the learning leaders and tech business leaders in your interactions. So where do you see a gap in curating the right learning programs, for effective digital transformation agenda for the organization? Now, the reason I'm asking is curating the right program. It's not just about the fact that you have these many people in your workforce who are certified on these they have these certificates, or they're certified on this particular technology. I think at the end of the day, just having those certificates, these many number of certificates does not really showcase the right talent skills. So how do you ensure that the right learning program is curated for the organization?
Sure, Shipra. Let me first start by saying maybe the next conversation we should get the technologists and the CLOs into the same room, right? Because it'll be an interesting discussion. But let me give you there are three frameworks that we normally see, and it's our definition, but normally we see organizations they fall into either of the three, or they have a mix of the three. The first one being, which is typically more an open learning framework, where and this is typically a CLO driven model, where they tend to bring a lot of content, a lot of training programs, academies, etc. They're focused around, in some way, skill being made available to the larger base of employees. And some of the metrics that they typically would measure is, okay, I've trained so many hours, right? So my per employee, I've trained 20 hours per employee, right? Those kind of metrics is what typically goes into an open learning framework, right? So the second one is where you tend to have an issue, or you're trying to fix a specific skill area, and then you push people into a guided learning framework, right? Where you say, okay, here is what I need as an organization to upskill myself in these areas. And then you tend to measure yourself around a certain amount of certifications and other stuff, right? So which are, again, another different types of metrics: how many course completions, how many certified people you have. So that's, we heard about some of those discussions here. The third one, which is, and I think Ramesh speak about it, right? Which is, I think Ramesh spoke about Skill Central, right? And I know Mahesh's team does this work pretty extensively, which is essentially looking at roles within the organization, identifying capabilities that are needed, understanding what are the skill sets that go underneath it, and then thereby building up an overall skill program. Here, the metrics tend to be very business driven, right? You tend to measure outcomes in the context of, let's say, in Sachin's case, he would say that, oh, do I have the ability to start off 5 additional new innovative projects in these new tech areas? Have I built those capabilities there, right? Or, so you're looking at building capabilities there. And then around the capabilities, you identify your, roles, and then you attach skill sets and proficiency levels. So you know that, okay, here is my strength and proficiency, here is my weakness and proficiency, here is where I want to push my next guided learning learning framework, or I want to make my larger, and I think you spoke about equal passion. I think it was Ramesh again who spoke about equal passion of learning amongst an experienced hire versus a young hire, right? So you actually, once as an individual, you start to see your skill proficiency, and then vis-a-vis where the organization is. And in a platform like ours, where we have about 85 million odd learners, close to 2,000 odd companies that operate on us on a metadata level, people can see where is your organizational proficiency or individual proficiency, right? You want to then, then this is the area that I want to individually move to, right? So we talk of this concept of I can from an individual perspective to an I want, right? You need to get people to want to move to the other side, right? Where there is a gap. So you work on these frameworks and get together with both the CLOs and the tech buyers. That's the way I would put it. We are starting to see one trend where we're starting to see human skills becoming a CLO framework or a framework of the CHRO domain. And we are starting to see capability more moving into the COO organizations or business organizations, right? Where skilling is moving away from what used to be traditionally in a CHRO role. It's moving into more and more into the business operations side. And this is, I'm talking about organizations not just in professional services or in technology, which is what is represented here. I'm starting to see this in manufacturing, automotive companies, because they are starting to visualize themselves in the context of their businesses is going to change how in the way digital is coming and hitting them, right? The entire platforms are getting replaced in terms of automotive industry. So people are starting to think around those lines. Similarly, banking, right? State Street would be a great example, right? I think I would say, along with the baby boomers of COVID, I think here is a digital baby boomer organization that State Street has created. So I'm sure you'll see more and more of those getting created, and skilling, will always have two dimensions, human and digital. And then the digital skills will move into more and more into business operations side. So that's the way we are seeing this right now.
Thanks, Dallas, for giving that overview of the trends that we are seeing. And I will come to the business. How do you align them to the business objectives and outcomes? Before that, Santanu, you've heard about the kind of challenges that organizations are facing. What about in your organization? In your view, what are some of the people challenges in adopting emerging technologies? And what is your top of mind challenge in terms of upskilling your workforce with the technologies of the future to stay relevant? Because the technologies keep changing. When we say emerging technologies, we have new technologies coming in every few months. So what are the challenges when it comes to identifying which are the right technologies to skill your workforce on and upskilling them on those technologies?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shipra. I would like to highlight 3 points, right? One, democratization of software, and that has led to the need for on-demand learning, and then making the learning interesting. So the challenges that I would say with upskilling people with relevant technologies, I will put under these 3 aspects. Number one, democratization of software. Like you mentioned, with the number of technologies that's emerged and available as open source today, it is practically impossible to have someone ready-made for all the skills that's relevant. So any part of any product that you touch, there will be an AI component, machine learning component, there will be RPA needed, there will be cloud that's there, and data is ubiquitous. And you'll need engineering practices like SRE or DevOps. So all of these have, and these are just teams. And within these teams, there are different software and solutions that's available. So it's practically impossible to kind of create a one-size-fits-all kind of a solution within an organization. So that's where the need for on-demand learning comes, right? So depending on the time and need, a certain solution will be identified, and we need to quickly provide training for the set of people who need to work on that area. So that's where e-learning plays a big part. So we need programs which are an authority in the industry, recognized, and at the same time going to impart the kind of knowledge that's required for people. So that's where the on-demand learning comes. And with these two, right, while learning programs are available, we need to make it interesting. Gamification is a big concept now. So a lot of e-learning, even Coursera, provides a lot of gamified learning avenues. And that's where people get interested. And certifications is also kind of a gaming, right? We need to incentivize people to take up that learning and post it in their LinkedIn. So it's become now a need. When someone's looking to project themselves as a good technologist, it's a matter of being recognized with the right set of certifications and the right set of skills. So that's the challenge, is to provide a platform within an organization where we meet our developers, overall people's aspirations to meet the challenges that's out there.
And thanks for pointing out. Yeah, I was not undermining the certificates when I said that, but definitely you are right. You know, the kind of enthusiasm that I see among the workforce when they post these certificates on LinkedIn, I think it does give them a push to do better and push to learn more and upskill themselves. Sudhir, you know, in terms of your organization, you are into medical device technologies, and there's a lot of transformation happening in terms of digital technologies as well as medical technologies, and combination of the two. So very, very niche technologies that you know you have to have the workforce for besides the regular digital technology. So how do you manage the upskilling challenge of upskilling your workforce constantly around these new technologies?
Yeah, thanks, Shipra, for the question. I think coming from the medical device company, these are the devices which are implanted in the human body. And you know, there are devices which track for heart patients, you know, when is the next heart attack one person can get. So those are the extreme technologies. I think for any transformation, for any company, and this is what we do is, before you jump into, you know, implementing a digital transformation or bringing in new technology, what is important to understand is there are two critical elements for this change. You might be bringing in the best of best technologies, and we have seen a lot of these technologies fail. The reason being, there are two important elements. One is the people and the process which you adopt. And that's where people miss the bus. You might bring in the best and best technology. I'll give you a simple example. You might be building a best technology like a bullet train, right? You can bring in using a bullet train, you can build the best technology, you can bullet train, but the bullet train is going to fail if you don't have the two tracks, which is the people readiness and the process readiness in place. And I see most of the organizations jumping into building a bullet train without understanding your people readiness and the process readiness, right? And the whole element of change management takes place. Every organization, given the pandemic, are investing in only two areas. One is the people upskilling, second is or the people capabilities, or the second is the technology, right? As the world is evolving more into digital collaboration, no more a kind of a physical collaboration because people are operating in a virtual world. So you need to think about, are your teams or people ready for a digital collaboration? Do they know how to collaborate in a digital way? That needs altogether a different thinking. As much as organizations are ready to invest in the people development, one thing really important is each individual in the organization, irrespective of the level they are, how to think that learning is a continuous journey in life, and that learning have to be, you know, continuous. We have to keep that learning continuous. So in our organization, we are now encouraging people to, you know, openly come and say that, okay, this is the gap. Because most of the organization, what happens is, or your manager identifies the gap and then you push the person for going for a training. We said that is not a long-term sustainability. We want the people to understand and realize what are the gaps by themselves and as a matured adult learning. So we are looking at a two-way. One is identifying gaps by the managers and also the individuals, and then designing the various skills which are required. I think someone pointed out that given people are working from home, the virtual management is becoming a big challenge. People are unable to manage teams because in the past, the mindset was to keep a track about the productivity. They're worried about productivity. But you can't sit and virtually and try to manage productivity. That's not the right way. People have to look for outcomes. There is 24 hours for everyone. So how are you giving the employee experience equally important for employee to balance their life? And these are very tough times, and transformation, you know, implementing any transformation during the virtual ways of working is getting really challenging. People are, you know, getting exhausted. So we are looking at how do we balance the agenda of digital transformation versus the employee experience, and how do you put them in a balanced environment, right? As the future of work is changing, right? Because the future of work is changing because the kind of business transformation that is driving to change in the future of work. There is no more going to be a lot of transactional work. Second, the future of workforce is changing, right? The kind of people who are coming with highly tech skills, you know, they are changing. And then the whole element of the future of workplace is also changing. So if you combine all the three elements and don't see an isolation of each of them, if you look at a holistic view of the future of work, the future of workforce, and the future of workplace, all three are transforming at the same time. And as a leaders, it is important that we balance these in a right sense, right? If you try to pedal and accelerate in one area and ignore the other area, the organization will not go far. And as a product company, right? We are a Boston Scientific. We are not a service-oriented company. We are more a product organization. We build products, and we take a lot of help from consultants like Accenture, the other consultants who help us in filling some of the gaps in terms of capabilities. But then we have to always look at a long-term readiness of the organization. People usually what they do is because the other companies are doing, we also have to implement. I think there's a difference between a best in class versus best in context. And every company's best in context is very, very different. The maturity level is very different. And that's what one have to assess before jumping into signing up for anything.
Absolutely. And I really like the idea where you mentioned that you also have your workforce come to you with the kind of skills that they want to be upskilled in, which is good, because there's a self-motivated upskilling and learning which is there in place. So I want to come back to Sachin now. What kind of training programs and upskilling program have you undertaken for your workforce? Is there a strategy in place as part of your overall digital transformation agenda, a strategic approach towards training and upskilling of your workforce?
That's a great question. Shipra. I mean, we have a strategy. It's called Digital Acceleration Program, and we are maniacally focused on executing on that. And it has three components, right? So the first one is all about building better capabilities, and it starts with hiring digital engineers that I think everybody talked about. We have established partnerships, we have specialized recruiters and boutique firms that we work with. We have a new hiring workflow with HackerRank online assessments to select top talent. We're creating full stack developers across .NET, Java, hybrid mobile, responsive web applications, as well as in emerging and niche technology. So that's kind of the first component. The second is, and you talked to this, Shipra, earlier, which is upskilling, to your point, because the shelf life of each technology is reducing. And therefore, even if you take somebody who's ready, they may not be ready a year from now. And that resonated a lot. So to that end, we have launched a digital academy, and it's for all the classifications of tech that I just talked about. It's a 13-week comprehensive program with a commitment of about 4 hours per week on top of the day job. And then upon successful completion, there is a fairly rigorous assessment that classifies our associates as digitally enabled developers. But I think, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here and being a little controversial, my view is it's not enough to just hire and upskill. I mean, I think those are table stakes. We enable our associates by building a rich digital ecosystem in which they can thrive. And I think that is the third and the final component of our digital acceleration program, which I'd like to say is the true differentiation. And to that end, we have a whole panoply of forums. So we have something called as Career Cafe. We have something called as Tech Thursdays. We have a dexterity of events. One of them is called Confluence. One of them is called a Testing Carnival. We have vibrant communities, such as community of test practitioners. We have a community of agile coaches. We have something called as Archers. This is a community of technical architects and tech leads. And the word archer means that they are on the tip of the arrow in terms of their knowledge of emerging technologies. And while all of this is happening, there is also a smorgasbord of events, including hackathons, ideathons, boot camps, and there's a lot of buzz around all of these events to generate significant thought leadership and IP across these forums and communities. So that's what I believe is probably more important. And I'll just give you some examples of what that digital ecosystem looks like, which is the third leg of the journey I was talking about. So, for example, we have an innovation program where we create sort of curated ideation journeys, but then the dream that we sell to our SMEs, product SMEs, is look, you either create a patentable idea or you create something that takes significant market share in terms of a digitally disruptive customer experience. So that's what we tell at the start of the innovation program. We have something called as an engineering and innovation leaderboard, where we celebrate our culture of shining a spotlight on work done by individuals and teams in terms of uploading reusable components. But then we say, well, it's not enough to create reusable components. You have to actually sell them so that others actually reuse them. So we reward them not just on creation, but on consumption of reusable assets. We have an automation excellence program, right, that fuels knowledge, engagement, idea exchange. I think the last 3 weeks we got something like 956 ideas, and that's groundswell. And then we have, I think, Santanam, you talked about gamification. We have gamification in terms of how the funnel of that ideation goes through to MVP and then to creating a product. And then the final thing I'll say is that, we, with digital apps and growing number of mobile devices and other devices like palm scanners, printers, biometric scanners, etc., we felt an urgent need to build a centralized lab, which we call Fiserv Devices Hive, that enables testers, developers to take remote control of the devices anywhere, anytime, virtually, right, to test app releases across multiple devices. By the way, hindsight is 2020. We built this lab not knowing that we would be in a pandemic, but in hindsight, it has turned out to be the best BCP mitigation strategy for all of our associates, working from home. And so the sort of, to summarize this, the point is, as we do all of this, right, have this digital ecosystem wherein our people can thrive, we're also working on simultaneously developing the right narrative in terms of how our associates will coexist with, collaborating, training, and managing with their digital co-workers, i.e. software robots, to ultimately achieve straight-through processing of repetitive processes that we have reimagined and reorchestrated, so that they can really then, employees can then really focus on those, customer experiences that I talked about, in answer to your first question, that are more differentiated and that are more intuitive. So I think it's a combination of all of these elements of the digital ecosystem and the employee engagement that I feel is perhaps far more important than which particular digital platform you have or how good is your hiring. Because unless you surround people and propel them and engage them constantly, you're not going to have that level of enthusiasm and that holistic learning interventions that are frequent.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A digital ecosystem, having the right culture is equally important. Mahesh, coming to you, you spoke about some of the upskilling and learning programs that you have undertaken. How do you ensure that you really maximize or fully maximize your workforce capabilities to achieve the kind of digital business outcomes and innovative business outcomes that are expected by your customers?
To begin with, I think our attempt is always to keep alive the intellectual curiosity of our people, because if that's there, then they continue to take initiative to go through all the learning rather than be pushing it to them. So that's the first thing. We have a program called Accenture Tech Expressway, which help people acquire knowledge on industry dimension, technology, engineering skills, etc. So that's a deep learning framework. But like you rightly said, for us, it is very critical that we bring innovation to our clients and create value through innovation. There are a number of things, but the one that we have found to be enormously successful is what we call our Global Technology Innovation Contest. So, this year, for example, almost 90,000 ideas were generated and people participate. There is an enormous amount of pride in coming up with ideas and submitting them. You go through a very elaborate assessment process. And we really celebrate our innovative winners, the people who come up with patents, people who help our clients with those innovative ideas. So these ideas like the events like the innovation contest is what is truly helping us in creating that culture of innovation.
Right, absolutely. I think that's very important because that culture, both you and Sachin mentioned about the ecosystem, the culture, which is as critical as the tools and technologies that you provide. Dulles, one important aspect of any learning, upskilling a training program for organization is the business outcomes. One is that it needs to align with the business objectives and transformation objectives of the organization. So how do they ensure that that the learning programs that they implement, deliver on those business outcomes? So there's always a debate of how much do I hire from outside, how much do I upskill my existing talent? So how do you work out the business outcomes and ROI on that decision?
Yeah, so I think I spoke about the skills first learning mindset. I think if your learning programs are more aligned to a skills first or a skill set driven outcomes, and that, where will that derive from? That was typically derived from the organizational mapping around roles and the skill sets and capabilities that goes underneath it, right? So if you work on those framework, they tend to be more business outcome driven, because they're very clearly, you can measure the outcomes in the context of what you're trying to achieve, because the source of those skill sets or the source of those capabilities originates from the business side, right? Versus a general framework of learning, right? Or a literacy. So to us, we see that as a very important framework. The second one that we also see, which is fairly impactful in the context of outcomes, is the ability for people to get hands-on learning, right? One is when you create capabilities, you also want to create an environment where they can be applied, and then they are ready, right? And you want to provide that environment. So you want to combine a learning platform with a platform that allows for hands-on. I think there are some beautiful ideas that Sachin spoke about, right? In the context of digital ecosystem that allows for a mechanism that allows for that to flourish, right? How do you create a mechanism that allows for that to flourish? So I think that was a great point that came from Sachin as well. So we see these as a few things. One of the other aspects that we've started to think about is, this one is the ecosystem that we exist in our organizations. And this, in this war for talent and this need for real-time talent that we hear about from our customers, we are starting to see customers wanting to go into the sources of these from where they would recruit, be it an arts graduate where you want them to get trained and be ready on let's say, data analysis skills, because that's something that is a lifelong skill that they need to be, or an engineering graduate where you want them to be available, trained in more interdisciplinary, more complex type of skills, which is available. So we are starting to, in our context of how we work with institutions, which is businesses, governments on one side. On the other side, we work very closely with universities, right? So of course, they are the source of a lot of our content, because Coursera delivers university-driven credentials. What we're also doing is we're taking those courses and going and deploying it in various colleges, right? We today work with about 60-odd colleges in India, where we go and work with colleges and embedding these programs into their curriculum, some of which is driven from the curriculum and where we add to that what they already do. Some of it is in terms of building employability, building readiness. And one of the experiments that we're doing is we're working with some of the tech companies and saying, okay, you define the skill sets that you want in the fresh graduates that you want to bring in, right? So we create a skill set around it, and that skill set is provided as an elective in the final year or the third, fourth year students. So the idea is that, you build an ecosystem where, you want to bridge that gap between new talent coming in and being ready. At the same time, you also want them to be trained in and be available in the context of what the business, where the future is going, right? We spoke about where the skills are going, where the jobs are going. You want those skills to be prevalent as well. So if you bridge these gap between the learning ecosystem and the business ecosystem, I think that's another framework of work that we're doing, because we feel that will have a big impact on business outcomes for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any learning program to be successful, that gap between the learning ecosystem and the business ecosystem has to be bridged, in order to have the right kind of business outcomes. So Ramesh, in terms of your expectations from the learning programs, you mentioned about the the focus that you're going to be having on digital technologies over the next few years, which actually started during the pandemic. So what kind of expectations do you have from your learning program to deliver on in order to get your tech workforce to be ready to implement those agenda that you have in mind?
So maybe I'll put this in two settings of updates, one connecting back to what Dallas just now said. We have a regular tradition of going into colleges and hiring people on a regular basis. And what we noticed is that because the trend is for them to come and stay for some time, many of them are going to do their higher educations and they're ending up actually going to US and other locations. We have started to realize that the traditional hiring is not really working in the long run, especially for companies like us. It might be good for a global delivery services company, but for a global in-house center, this model is not working because we are only hiring about 100, 150, 200 people based upon the size of the organization. So I'm excited for what Dallas said, that we are anyway planning to partner with some of the universities, and thanks to COVID, now we have expanded the capability to reach out to the universities in Delhi and in Pune and other locations, because we thought it's not necessary we have to look into a Bangalore or a Hyderabad just because we are located in these cities, right? So that's the first thing. Second is, if there is a way we can create a pathway for learning from their third year engineering, and quite frankly, we are picking people from non-computer science background because we found them to be more passionate to build their career into IT, and they tend to actually stay with us for a longer, not because they like us, but they found out that they can become a better IT professional with us. So if there is a way companies like Coursera or any other organizations partner with the universities and us, we can create a better learning path from their third years. So that way, by the time they come out of the colleges, they will be better professionals. Of course, many companies are doing, we are not doing anything great. It's a very common phenomenon to have an internship program. So the way we are now hiring is bring them as interns. They will actually work on these emerging technologies from day one. That means they're already trained at least 6 months before they come on board. So 4.1 is when we are actually partnering with them. 4.2, they physically come and work with us, in the sense they are getting onboarded as an intern, and we pay them a very meaningful stipend to attract them to work with us. And we have seen some really good outcomes, Shipra. Just to give an idea, thankfully, the bunch of people that we brought from various colleges did phenomenal job last year on real projects, especially into automation as a major focus area for some of our clients. The outcome is the entire management, both India as well as the global management, were thrilled to see that something that they should have thought of bringing very highly paid consultants is being done with interns, not even campus graduates, interns. And this year, we are able to do that for more than 150 people. So maybe, that's an opportunity for us to partner with organizations like Coursera. That's the first one. The second one is the existing workforce. As I told earlier, that they are quite passionate about learning. But what we found out is that their will and their skill in many places is not matching. So we are putting an additional stem of assessment in place to ensure that you're passionate about learning, because you realize that you can be better marketable in the organization and outside the organization, but you may not be capable of learning that at the same pace as somebody who is just 3 years or 4 years or 5 years out of college. However, I think for us to be able to segregate that, apply the right kind of focus around to see how do we put them into 2 buckets of learning, accelerated path and a moderate path, is helping us to create a better pipeline. That means some are getting ready for this year, some are getting ready for next year for me. So think of a pipeline creation, how we can do it internally. All these strategies are actually being implemented today. I have seen some good results until now. We are just about 4 years in the country. So naturally, we don't have a history to say that we have done something in the last 10 years. So we are taking baby steps to make the difference happen. Just to summarize what I just now said, I was reading an article that was published in one of our groups where it said Microsoft said 41% attrition is going to be experienced by the US companies. I can pretty much connect the dots here. I do see that people are moving around. But at the same time, I also realize the fact that unless we build the talent within, this continual rat race is going to happen. It's going to hurt the IT companies. And somewhere I think the build of talent within, learning within can make a big difference. That's what we are hoping to do through our company.
When you talked about attrition, I think that's very important because there have been a lot of news around how companies are facing high attrition rates. There was recently news of Cognizant facing record high attrition rates within the quarter. So I think that kind of skill, that kind of churn that creates makes it even more important to have the right upskilling programs in place, not only to keep your employees motivated, but to also have the ready supply of talent for your digital transformation goals. So Isaac, one is that not, there's no one size fits all learning program, for your organization. So what kind of expectations do you have from your learning program, from the learning program within your organization? And do you have the different sizes or different types of programs for different types of employees?
That's a great question. And actually, I was just reflecting on Dallas framework around, open learning framework and guided learning and also roles capabilities. As I was thinking about it, at least in our case, all these are employed. I think that is probably the case with most of the organizations, right? There are certain kinds of learning which is offered through open learning, where, for example, we offer a benefit to all our employees. Go learn whatever you want. I mean, this is not something we expect. There is so much of reimbursement you can claim, which is a pretty generous amount. And wherever you want to learn, whatever you learn, no questions asked, right? So that is kind of an open learning, and people might pick up specific things to what they are working on today, or they may pick up some adjacent technologies, right? I think so platforms like Coursera and others are typically play a role where employees would like to go ahead and do that. And the second thing, the guided learning, sometimes, with the acceleration of all the things that we need to do, you might say, okay, we really need to get a bunch of employees trained in how to develop securely software, right? I mean, what are the things around it? Then we might say, okay, we need to really have a guided learning program. We need to customize it for our needs, have people sign up and require them to take it. Maybe we bring an external instructor in-house and spend a week onto it, right? So that is again something that we have been adopting and following from a guided learning. And then, of course, from a roles and capabilities point of view as well, right? For example, particularly I can think about product management roles. We have a number of product management roles out of India, and some of the certifications are very popular in that. I think people would like to get themselves certified in certain platforms around it. So we have said, okay, this is a very role and capability specific learning and certification. Again, we would encourage. So I think there is, it's not like one size fits all, but I think there is a good set of framework. I think Dallas you provided. I think for most organizations, all of them apply. I would add two more things. I think one of them, what Ramesh mentioned as well about internship. We have been doing this for almost 8-9 years, and we have 100 to 150 interns each year, right? And one of the things we found is, of course, that it is hard to be also critical of the education system, because there is only so much you can learn in a degree program. You have to do your core courses, okay, you'll pick up your programming languages and so on. But then coming and working in a team setting with a real project where there is already some code bases there, things are there, people know more, some of them know less. It's a whole different experience and learning. It is very hard to take it into a college. So we have actually been bringing in interns for a 6-month period, but we do bring in only computer science interns and already having good coding skills and academics and so on, bring them in, have them immersed with our full-time employees, working with them for a lengthy period, right? And many of them, it is really one of those. Even I had, when graduated, I had the opportunity to be an intern for a period of time, and that really gives you a leg up when you really go into a full-time job. And a lot of them have benefited from this program. Either they join us full-time or whether they go somewhere else. And as part of that, obviously, right, as they have to do that function, they have to take up some courses like Coursera. Somewhere they'll have to pick up the skills, but still working in a team really adds a lot more mentorship. The fifth thing, I think one other thing I would like to add is, this is about partnering with computer science institutes for research. So we had participated in a funded research program with IIIT Hyderabad in areas related to, document management related areas, basically computer vision to recognize, tables and other kinds of information out of a document. So these are, again, I mean, I would look at this as another way of bringing skills into an organization. Now partnering with academia where really good research capabilities are there. I mean, you may not really go ahead and hire a whole bunch of PhDs into your organization, have a career path with them, but this is another way of bringing in skills, and a lot of them do a fantastic job in terms of that. So I would agree with the general framework I think Dallas mentioned, but I think all of them apply to probably most organizations. But I would extend it to the internship sort of a way of mentorship, and also maybe extend it to going into academia more from a research point of view and bringing those capabilities back into the organization from capability building point of view.
Right. So while there is definitely a framework, a unified framework that probably will work for all organizations, but like you said, yes, there are various avenues of bringing in skills into the organization. So Santanu, when it comes to the debate between hiring versus upskilling, what is your response to that, and how do you ensure that you have the right skill sets for the right roles in the organization?
Yes, that's a great debate that goes on, right? Build versus buy is how we call it. So while we have to hire from outside for to act as a catalyst for certain transformation programs, for certain new build-outs, it is very important to be inclusive to our committed employees who've been with us for a long term. And we may have people who worked on mainframes, AS400, things which are technologies which are relatively legacy. And there have been a lot of success stories when you invest on them, right? So they worked on certain legacy technologies to contribute to the organization, and it's important for the organization also to give back to them by investing in them. And that is where the build part comes very, very handy and important. So to kind of inspire confidence that my organization will take care of my relevance in the industry, it's very, very important to have those programs that can help the internal talent get trained and acquire knowledge on emerging technologies. And whenever we assemble a team for an emerging technology-based project, we are very conscious to ensure that it's a combination of build and buy. So usually it is like 10 to 20% people who have the ready skills, not in all the areas, but in some parts of the areas who can act as the catalyst. But then 70, 80% will be the people who've been with us for long term. And then another 10, 20% could also be interns and campus grads who also need some level of training, but then they are more equipped, right? They are hungry and they are kind of in that learning mode. So it's a combination of these three, right? So the experts from outside, people who have expertise in adjacent areas, or they know what is software engineering, but they need to be upskilled in certain specific technologies, and also raw talent, right, who can be groomed, molded into any area.
Yeah. So when you say that it's a combination of getting experts from outside, so there, companies like Accenture, so Mahesh needs to ensure that he has the right skill sets available to provide to companies like you to ensure that you have those skills available, which actually goes back to all the IT services and technology companies to have that funnel going all the time at the accelerated pace. So in terms of your strategy, what is your strategy around upskilling, and what are your expectations from these upskilling programs within the organization?
Yeah, so a lot of things we are doing, I think, like every organization, right? So we have a young leaders program, which is both a technical as well as non-technical. I think one of the challenges we also have is that not only we have to ensure that our employees are upskilling and trained, but the doctors as well, the physicians, because some of the products what we manufacture that have to be trained. So we have a lot of virtual universities and labs, the R&D labs, for the doctors also to be trained. So we have a specialized training field for employees. We have a specialized team to train the doctors, the surgeons who perform those. So we have built a virtual university within the organization, and where we segment various training specific to the employees whether you're a finance professional or a HR professional or a legal or an IT professional. And we also have the R&D. So we invest almost more than $1 billion in R&D, right? So those people whom we are hiring from universities, what Ramesh mentioned, the interns programs and other things, we continuously decide on various levels. There's level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. The 4 levels, we measure their performance and see that they're upskilling on him. And this learning is going to be an ongoing throughout the year. It's not kind of a program or a project. It will end in a certain period. So we balance our training curriculum both for employees, as I mentioned, for the physicians, and this kind of a university we created for each of them. And as you all know that, gone are the days where people say that I'm a finance professional, I can't understand technology. That cannot work anymore, right? So there are people in legal professional or HR professional, people say that, oh, I don't understand technology. That choice is no more. So we are now encouraging our finance folks or supply chain folks to help them understand what's the new technology coming in the way and what is the areas they have to upskill. So it's not like, someone said rightly, it's not like one size fit all, right? So based on the maturity of the experience of the individual, based on the function or the role they're playing, we have our customized trainings planned across the organization.
Great. I think, thank you so much, everyone. I know we have crossed the time limit of 1 hour, but it was a very engaging discussion. So I didn't want to stop it in between. I think one very interesting aspect that I heard from a few panelists today was that how you are getting your non-tech workforce, how you're skilling them on some of the tech skills, the digital skills. I think that is one area that is really interesting to watch out for, and that can actually address the talent shortage that we are facing in the tech workforce right now. Any parting thoughts that you would like to anyone?
Shipra, I want to make one final comments from my end. I think I'm a finance professional. I'm not much of a technology, okay? Even though I play a lot of transformation-led, business-driven programs. One thing I think everywhere we talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence. I think what I want to remind everyone, and this is what I say in most of the forums, is let's not forget there is also a real intelligence, right? It's not machine learning always. There's a human learning, which is the most important for everyone. And let's not forget the real intelligence as a human we bring, right? As much we focus a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and we confuse a lot of non-tech people with all these great words. I think there's a real importance to really help someone understand in simple terms what digital transformation is. I mean, if you ask 10 people, everyone will come with their own definitions. I think these are the terms which are maturing. People are understanding more and more as they investing. But I think there is a real intelligence and human learning. We should never forget.
No, definitely. I think both have to go hand in hand. So I think one, yes.
Sorry, my parting comments is gone are the days when we can talk to our immediate direct reports. They can go and talk to the next level, celebrating in a conference room what to do next. That's a reality. Even if we go to a hybrid model, we can only say a portion of our team anytime at the workspace. However, it's not going to be 100% remote working. I don't believe in that personally because I have gone through that in my previous life and it failed. What I've started to realize is when you're an entrepreneur, you're always looking at how to make your business work, whether you're actually sitting with your team or you're traveling or you're working remote. So we now have a major focus on how do we make our people managers, the key leaders, think like an entrepreneur. This is your function of 10 people. How do you run this as if this is your own company of 10 people startup and you challenge us on what do you need to make that happen? So it's a change that we wanted to bring in their thinking to, I'm a part of a company, I'll go by whatever the instructions my manager has given. I just have to complete this and I'm done today too. I'm an entrepreneur. How do I make this team the most effective while I'm going through my own challenges? So that program is resulting into some really good insights that we otherwise don't listen in our rooms. We are using that as our active listening opportunity. trying to use that data to make changes to the way that we behave and respond back to our teammates. I'm sure if we do that, we will find those passionate people who will come forward to learn, and that learnings will take us an opportunity to adopt the transformation, especially on the digital side, better.
Absolutely. I think aligning passion and learning can actually help solve a lot of the challenges that we are facing as far as a talent crunch is concerned. Any other parting thoughts, Mahesh, if you want to add something? Yeah, Sachin, I'll come to you also. Yeah.
I would just say, Shipra, that there is, for the people, there is no better time than now to be in technology. There is enormous opportunity, provided they look at continuously investing in themselves, and as businesses, we have the obligation to enable that. So it's a perfect synergistic time, exciting times, and I think we are going to see the growth wave continue for a while.
I totally agree. I think this is the crisis time is actually the best time to build new opportunities. Totally agree with you. Sachin, you were saying something. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick thought. I mean, building on what Ramesh said, right? My view is that fear and creativity don't go together. Fun and creativity go together. So it's all about creating that environment where people are having fun, because we spend incredible hours virtually or physically as it is at workplace. It needs to be fun. And the other thing I would say is that as we talk about Gen X and Gen Y and millennials and Gen Z, each one of us interact, play, learn, and do business very differently. So I think we need to get out of the way, speaking for most of us on this forum, in terms of designing the workplace, the future of work and the future of experience, and design it from the perspective of what is going to be the dominant workforce. In India, we often talk about diversity and inclusion, with gender diversity as one of the major dimensions. But I think the age diversity, particularly in a vibrant workforce like India, I think is very important, the way we design these learning experiences or talent experiences.
Yeah, very important point. I think how do you ensure that you have the right learning programs for the different age groups that you have within the organization? Isaac, you wanted to add something, yes?
Yeah, sure. I just want to also bring out the point that big part of learning comes through mentorship, collaboration, and teamwork. Now, if we look at the remote work, however it shapes up in the future, that being one. Second, the growth of the industry, that also means new people are coming into the organization. And the level of attrition, that means there is a constant turnover. So in a 3 to 4 years time window, right, you might end up with a situation in an organization with a lot of changes and a lot of new people. So I think one of the areas to focus on is how do you really make all this mentorship, collaboration, teamwork continue to work well as bringing in learning and growth to everybody, right? I think this is a little bit of a tricky problem that need to be maybe faced more directly than running into a problem down the line, because it all leads to the culture, identity. I mean, all of these are related and eventually to the loyalty, and then comes back to, again, attrition in a full circle, right? If you don't take care of all of these things well.
Absolutely. So Dallas, before I give you the last word, I think it needless to say, we all agree that, when it comes to digital transformation, or rather future-proofing your organization, the connect between the right skill sets, the connect between upskilling your workforce and future-proofing your organization has never been felt more acutely than it is now. And therefore, I think it's the next 1 year or 2 years are going to be very interesting to watch out for as far as the learning and the training programs of organizations are concerned. And very important aspect here is the employee, keeping the employees motivated. So how upskilling can be an important factor in keeping your employees motivated, and not just for your digital transformation goals, is going to be equally important, because that is what could be a key factor in addressing the attrition rates within the organization. So that's from my side. So Dallas, the last word from you.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. But first and foremost, let me thank all my fellow panelists. I do believe it was really an interesting exchange of ideas from all of you. So, wonderful exchange of ideas. So maybe I'll just leave the last word on this isn't out there yet. I think I'm sure this space is going to evolve, but what this will be about will no longer be about top talent, but it will be about keeping talent on top, right? So that's probably where the world will be in terms of how we look at this. And there will be plenty of mechanisms around it. We look forward to collaborating with each one of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dallas. Thank you to all the panelists. It was indeed a pleasure moderating this session, and the diversity of thoughts and insights that was there in this panel is really uncomparable. Thank you so much once again for your time, and my apologies for the extension of time, but I think it was worth extending the time to hear your thoughts.